All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on some of the invisible logic that, well, basically runs our world. We're going to tackle some real head-scratchers, like why millions of perfectly good, brand-new shipping containers just get thrown away. And, get this, why the biggest oil producer on the planet still has to import oil. Sounds crazy, right?
Okay, so let's start with a puzzle you've probably seen 1,000 times and never even thought about. Shipping containers. I mean, they're everywhere, right? They're the absolute lifeblood of global trade. But here's the weird part. For millions of them, the journey doesn't end with them being reused. Nope. It ends right here in a scrapyard.
And then there's this one. It's a real paradox. How can the world's #1 oil producer also be one of the world's top oil importers? It doesn't seem to make any sense. But believe it or not, both of these mysteries have a common thread. It's this hidden logic, a mix of economics and history, that's pulling the strings. So let's dive in and untangle this.
All right, first up, the container conundrum. We're talking about these massive steel boxes. They are without a doubt the engines of global trade. You've got millions of them crisscrossing the oceans at any given moment.
So where does this story even begin? Well, it all comes down to a massive, and I mean massive, trade imbalance. You see, China exports just a staggering amount of goods to the rest of the world, but they import way, way less in return. And that creates this huge one-way flow of containers.
And look, the scale of this imbalance is just mind-blowing. In 2023, China's trade surplus was over $823 billion. To put that into perspective for you, that's more than 20 times the surplus of all of Europe combined. We're not talking about a small gap here. This is a chasm that literally shapes the entire global shipping system.
And this imbalance, it's not just numbers on a screen. It has a real physical consequence. It means that for every, say, 10 containers that arrive in the U.S. packed with goods from China, there are only enough American exports to fill up about 4 of them for the trip back. So that's the big question, right? What happens to the other 6, that's 60%? You'd think the obvious answer is, well, just send them back empty. But this is where that hidden logic of global economics kicks in, and it turns out that's exactly the wrong answer.
Okay, here's the key number. It costs about $3,000. That's the price to ship one of those giant empty steel boxes from a port in the US all the way back to China. Think about it. It's taking up precious space on a ship that could be carrying a full, profitable container.
And then there's this number, $2,000. That's how much it costs for China to just build a brand new one. So why on earth would anyone pay $3,000 to return a used container when they can make a shiny new one for only $2,000? The answer is simple, they wouldn't. It makes no economic sense.
And so, the cold, hard logic is that it's just cheaper to abandon the containers right there in America. They start piling up in ports and junkyards. From there, they get sold off for cheap storage, some get turned into cool container homes and offices, and others just get melted down for their couple of tons of steel. This mountain of what looks like waste, it's really a physical symbol of our unbalanced global economy.
Okay, so let's shift gears to our second puzzle. And you're going to see this same kind of weird, counterintuitive logic at play, but this time with something even more fundamental to our world, oil, and specifically America's very strange relationship with it. You know, the US is the world's #1 oil producer. It actually pumps out more than even Saudi Arabia. And yet, it's also the world's second largest oil importer. This analogy just nails it. It's like a farmer who grows tons of wheat, but then has to go out and buy bread from someone else. It feels backwards, doesn't it?
So, what's going on here? Well, the answer isn't simple. It actually breaks down into 3 hidden factors. This isn't about one single bad decision. It's a really complex web of chemistry, logistics, and, you guessed it, old-school history.
First off, you have to understand that not all oil is created equal. The oil that comes out of U.S. fields, especially in places like Texas, is what's called light, sweet crude. It's really high-quality stuff. The problem? Most of America's giant refineries were built decades ago, and they were designed to process a different kind of oil, heavy sour crude, the kind you get from places like Mexico or Venezuela. They're just not built for the oil America actually produces.
And to upgrade all of those massive refineries so they could process that light crude, you're talking about a price tag of over $200 billion. So the economics become pretty simple, really. It's way, way cheaper for the U.S. to just sell its own high-quality light oil to other countries and then import the heavy stuff that its refineries are already set up to handle.
The second reason is a bit of a history lesson. It's a law that's over 100 years old, called the Jones Act. Now, it was passed right after World War I with a good intention, to make sure America always had a strong shipping industry for national security. But this law had a massive, and I mean massive, unintended side effect on the economy.
Here's the problem. Because U.S.-built ships with U.S. crews are so much more expensive to operate than foreign ships, the Jones Act makes shipping anything between two American ports, like say oil from Texas to a refinery in New York, incredibly expensive. So expensive, in fact, that it is literally cheaper for that New York refinery to buy oil from halfway across the world than it is to buy it from Texas. Crazy, right?
All right, for our last example, let's see how this same logic, this mix of loopholes and history, plays out on the world stage in geopolitics. And this story, honestly, it feels like it's straight out of a Hollywood heist movie.
So, despite being under heavy international sanctions, Iran somehow managed to get its hands on 5 Boeing 777 airliners. And the way they did it is incredible. The planes started out in a desert boneyard in Australia. They were bought by a U.S. shell company, then re-registered to a fake company in Madagascar, shuffled over to Cambodia, and then on a flight supposedly headed for Kenya, they just turned off their transponders over Afghanistan, went completely dark, and vanished, only to reappear secretly landed in Iran.
Now, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? These smuggled planes should be grounded, stuck in Iran forever. But there's another piece of international law, one that actually governs all the flights we take, and it creates this one critical loophole.
It's called the Chicago Convention, and it's basically the foundation of modern aviation. What it says is that unless you are officially at war with a country, you cannot block one of their civilian aircraft from flying through your airspace. So while countries can, and they absolutely do, refuse to let these Iranian planes land or refuel, they can't legally stop them from just flying right over their heads. And that gives this ghost fleet continued access to the world's skies.
So when you put it all together, whether you're talking about throwaway containers or mismatched oil or these smuggled jets that can still fly freely, you start to see the same pattern emerge. The most visible things in our world are often being controlled by an invisible logic, a logic made of costs, legal loopholes, and pieces of forgotten history.
And that really leaves us with one final big question. What other invisible systems are shaping our world right now? It's just a great reminder that the logic running our global economy is often hiding in plain sight, and the systems we all depend on are way stranger and honestly way more fascinating than they first appear.